Welcome back to Faith and Fury, everyone. Today we've got a heavyweight bout brewing that feels ripped straight from the history books. We're talking about Pope Leo XIV and Donald Trump. And honestly, the parallels to Thomas Becket and King Henry II are just uncanny. It's the ultimate clash of spiritual authority versus temporal power.
Uncanny is an understatement, Russ. The drama is absolutely escalating. Pope Leo XIV, our first American pope, mind you, from Chicago, has really ramped up his condemnations of Trump's immigration policies. It's not just a subtle critique. He's pulling out the big guns, directly targeting U.S. audiences.
He's not pulling any punches, that's for sure. I mean, from Castel Gandolfo, in English no less, urging deep reflection on how migrants are treated, and then dropping Matthew 25, reminding everyone that judgment comes from how you welcome the foreigner. That's a direct challenge, you know?
Absolutely. He's talking about inhuman policies affecting people who've lived here for years without causing problems. And the incident on All Saints' Day at the Broadview facility near Chicago, when IC reportedly wouldn't let clergy deliver Holy Communion to Catholic detainees, that hit home literally for Leo, being from Chicago.
Yeah, that specific detail, blocking communion, it's such a raw nerve for Catholics. It's not just about policy anymore. It becomes about religious freedom, about the spiritual care of the flock. And it puts IC in a really difficult spot PR-wise, too.
Exactly. And it wasn't just immigration. He also slammed Trump's naval strikes on suspected drug trafficking ships off Venezuela, arguing they fuel conflict instead of peace. He's pushing dialogue over violence, which you know is a consistent papal message, but it feels particularly sharp against this administration's America First approach.
It's a comprehensive critique. This isn't just a one-off statement. We saw his October 1st encyclical already criticize the administration's approach as failing Catholic teachings on dignity and religious liberty. So he's building a case systematically.
Right, it's a very deliberate strategy. And predictably, the White House has not been quiet in return. Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt dismissed the Pope's remarks, saying he doesn't understand the complexities of securing our borders. That's a classic counterpunch.
Oh, absolutely. And the official statement slamming his views as out of touch with American realities, that's a direct echo of how they've handled past criticisms. It paints the Pope as an outsider, someone who doesn't grasp the real-world challenges.
And the internal dynamics are fascinating, too. VP J.D. Vance, a Catholic himself, reportedly expressed frustration internally, calling it a panic moment for conservative faithful within the administration. That tells you this isn't just political theater. It's hitting a nerve with people of faith who are trying to reconcile their political loyalties with their spiritual ones.
It's a genuine dilemma for them, I imagine. Imagine being a conservative Catholic, trying to support an administration you believe in, and then the spiritual leader of your faith tradition comes out swinging this hard. That's a tough tightrope walk.
And on X, the backlash is just fierce and completely polarized. Pro-Trump voices are pushing back hard. I saw one user, Red Roof 2000, insisting deport all illegal aliens of any age regardless of their length of time living in the USA illegally. No nuance there.
Yeah, that's the digital town square for you. But then, on the flip side, you have people sharing BBC and Reuters articles, amplifying the Pope's message, blasting the policies as inhumane, and even warning of hellfire for participants. It's like a theological battle playing out online.
It really is. And conservative Catholics, as you said, feel genuinely stung. They're labeling Leo a betrayer of tradition, seeing it as leftist activism. They're echoing those gripes that he should focus on Vatican affairs. Walls included, some have said, implying a bit of hypocrisy given the Vatican's own border policies.
That's a powerful counter-argument that often gets thrown around. If the Vatican has its own walls, its own stringent entry requirements, how can the Pope criticize another sovereign nation for doing the same? It's not a direct apples-to-apples comparison, obviously, but it lands emotionally for a lot of people.
It absolutely does. It makes you wonder, though, if Leo keeps pressing, could this brew into a full-blown schism? I mean, no turbulent priest assassins in sight yet, thank goodness, but the rhetoric is definitely heating up.
It could. And this brings us to a really sharp point that's been raised by some listeners. Does Pope Leo XIV's stance on immigration clash with the biblical call to respect civil authority? I mean, Romans 13, 1-7, where Paul urges submission to governing authorities as God ordained, that's pretty clear, isn't it?
It's a tension worth unpacking for sure. On one hand, yes, Scripture stresses obedience to laws. Titus 3:1 also tells us to be subject to rulers and authorities. And critics on X are absolutely using those verses, saying the Pope should respect our laws like we're told to respect God's.
The White House essentially echoed that, right? Doesn't get border security. They're framing it as Leo trying to undermine national sovereignty, telling a country how to manage its own affairs.
But Pope Leo's focus is on the moral implications, particularly the impact on families and detainees' religious rights. He's leaning on Catholic social teaching, emphasizing human dignity and Matthew 25's call to welcome the stranger, which he sees as superseding strict legalism when laws cause harm. He's not dismissing law altogether. He's challenging its application when it dehumanizes.
So he's arguing that there's a higher moral law, a divine law, that takes precedence over civil law when civil law becomes unjust or harms human dignity. That's very much in line with historical church positions, right? Think Aquinas, or even Beckett's defiance of Henry II, which is why that parallel is so apt.
Exactly. The church has always maintained that unjust laws aren't true laws. It's a tightrope, though. How do you, as the Pope, balance biblical obedience to authorities with what you see as your prophetic duty to critique injustice?
And the cost can be high historically. Becket paid with his life. While we're not talking about that level of physical danger here, Leo is certainly risking a modern-day rift within the church, especially with American Catholics.
I think that's the core of it, Russ. It's not about disrespecting law itself, but about reminding us that laws are meant to serve humanity, not the other way around. When a law leads to the suffering or dehumanization of people, especially the most vulnerable, the church feels compelled to speak up.
And that leads us to another really important point that's been raised. Many are asking why Pope Leo XIV isn't showing greater concern about Catholics and Christians being murdered by Muslims around the world. It's a fair critique, given the grim reality of global persecution.
It's absolutely a fair point, Russ. The persecution of Christians by Islamist extremists in places like Nigeria, Syria, Sudan, it's a devastating reality. Thousands killed, displaced, systematic attacks on churches and villages. Reports from groups like Aid to the Church in Need highlight this constant violence.
And you'd think that would be front and center for any pontiff, a shepherd caring for his flock, especially those under attack.
And he hasn't been silent on it, actually. It's been a core thread since he became Pope in May 2025. In one of his earliest major addresses, he explicitly called out the violence and discrimination Christians endure in the Middle East, Africa, and Asia. He pledged diplomatic pushes and urged international leaders to act, not just pray.
Oh, that's good to hear. Because sometimes, from the outside, it can look like the focus is purely on one issue, and other, equally pressing issues get overshadowed.
He met with Aid to the Church in Need in October, for instance. He received their 2025 Religious Freedom Report, which details persecution in 24 countries, including jihadist hotspots like Nigeria and Pakistan. And he recommitted the Vatican to defending threatened faith communities.
So he's engaging with the organizations on the ground, getting the reports, making it part of the Vatican's diplomatic agenda. That's more than just words.
Exactly. And there are specific flashpoints he's addressed. In June, after Islamist militants slaughtered around 200 Christians in Nigeria's Benue state, he condemned it as a terrible massacre in his Angelus. He prayed for the faithful, who he said have been unceasing victims of violence, and blasted the indifference from governments and media.
That's a strong condemnation. He's not just generically calling for peace, he's naming specific incidents and the victims.
And he echoed that in July for a church bombing in the DRC, often by armed groups with Islamist ties. He entrusted victims to God's mercy and appealed for global prevention of such tragedies. And back in May, addressing Eastern Catholics fleeing war and persecution in Iraq, Syria, and Lebanon, he vowed every effort for peace and praised those who stayed as witnesses.
So, his actions indicate a clear and consistent concern for persecuted Christians. It's not like he's ignoring it.
No, he's definitely not. His approach actually mirrors Francis's firm denunciation of extremism. He warned against religious fundamentalism in October, while also pushing interfaith dialogue to build bridges. He's called for Muslim leaders to join in rejecting violence.
Which is where some critics on X argue he's too soft. They're slamming him for not naming Islamists enough, or for prioritizing migrants over martyrs, saying things like Pope Leo doesn't care about African Catholics being massacred by Muslims. So it feels like selective outrage to them.
And that's the perception challenge, isn't it? The church's balancing act is to condemn the killers without demonizing 1.8 billion Muslims. It's a very delicate line to walk. Does that land as principled or preachy, or does he need to go harder on specifics for some people to be satisfied?
It's a tough call. When you're dealing with issues of faith and global politics, you're always going to have different constituencies pulling you in different directions. For Leo, he seems to be integrating the concern for persecuted Christians into his broader cry for human dignity everywhere, whether it's Nigerian villages or U.S. borders.
Right, it's a consistent ethic of life from beginning to end. And across all borders, he's trying to be consistent. But consistency sometimes doesn't translate well in a soundbite-driven world.
Exactly. And that's where the media and social media narratives can really shape public perception. This whole situation, it just highlights the immense pressure and the almost impossible balancing act that a modern pope faces. You have to be a spiritual leader, a diplomat, a moral compass, and a political commentator all at once.
And in Leo's case, with his Chicago roots, it feels even more personal, doesn't it? He's not just speaking from an ivory tower, he's speaking from a place that has a very real connection to the issues he's addressing.
Absolutely. It brings a certain authenticity, I think, for some, and perhaps more intense scrutiny for others. So how this unfolds, whether it de-escalates or truly boils over into a modern schism, is something we'll all be watching very closely. It's a fascinating, if sometimes troubling, moment in history.
It truly is. It's a reminder that the clash between spiritual and temporal power is as old as time, and it never really goes away. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive, Russ.
My pleasure, Lee. And thank you all for listening to Faith and Fury. We'll catch you next time.